Usually when we talk about playing a game, there is this underlying expectation of fixed, immutable boundaries.
Right.
Think about a game of chess. The board has exactly 64 squares.
Yeah, and the pieces always do the exact same thing.
Exactly. The knight always moves in that very specific L shape.
Oh.
The rules just sit there, unchanging and unfeeling. It's rigid. And honestly, it's comforting. We like our games to be categorized and predictable and contained within a neat little box.
Well, it's binary by design. I mean, a move is either legal or illegal. It's a clean mathematical space where all the variables are totally known to both players from the very first move.
But then you step into the world of classic tabletop role-playing, and suddenly that chessboard is infinite.
Completely infinite.
Like the knight might decide, you know what, I'm not capturing that pawn. I want to try and negotiate a peace treaty with him.
Right. Or the bishop is secretly hiding a volatile magical artifact under his robes.
Yes. And the board itself might suddenly catch on fire because someone knocked over a lantern in the tavern. We are looking at a gameplay landscape that is wonderfully, terrifyingly murky.
It is the absolute definition of a living, breathing, unpredictable ecosystem. And when you remove those hard computerized boundaries, it requires a very specific, a very nuanced kind of human guidance to keep the entire experience from just collapsing into absolute chaos.
Which is exactly why we are plunging back into the abyss today. Welcome back to Into the Megadungeon, and specifically, welcome to another deep dive.
Glad to be back.
If you have ever tried to run a fantasy game for your friends and felt completely overwhelmed by the sheer chaotic unpredictability of it all, you are in the right place today. In our last deep dive on this channel, we took a magnifying glass to the player side of the equation.
Right, the old school Essentials Player's Tome.
Exactly. We explored the rulebook designed specifically for the people sitting around the table rolling up characters. But today, our mission is the other half of that equation. We are unpacking the old school Essentials Referee's Tome.
The ultimate, definitive guidebook for the person actually running the game.
And this isn't just any generic guidebook we are analyzing today, is it?
No, not at all. This specific volume is fascinating because of what it represents, both historically and mechanically, for tabletop gaming. I mean, it is essentially a complete masterclass in running a very specific, highly praised, hybrid style of game.
Yeah, the big picture here is what really drew me to this material in the first place. What this book does is it takes the wondrous, weird, incredibly granular flavor of late 1970s advanced tabletop gaming.
Oh yeah, you know the era.
Right, we're talking bizarre, unexplainable monsters, complex magical artifacts that can backfire horrifically, and deeply imaginative oddities. But instead of keeping the clunky, contradictory math that usually weighed that era down,
Which was a nightmare, let's be honest.
it totally was. So it meticulously bolts all of that advanced flavor onto the streamlined, lightning-fast, easy-to-use mechanics of the beloved early 80s basic rule sets.
It's an architectural marvel of game design, honestly. It strips away all the friction of calculating obscure combat matrices.
Which nobody misses.
No one misses that. And that allows the referee to focus entirely on the imaginative weight of the world. But having those streamlined rules on paper is only half the battle. The real magic and the real challenge happens in how those rules are interpreted and applied at the table.
Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive. Our goal today is to completely demystify what this tome actually provides for a new or even veteran referee.
We're going to cover pretty much everything.
Everything. We're starting with the overarching psychological philosophy of running a game, because it really is a psychology. Then we'll move into building functioning, breathing economies, designing a world from a blank sheet of hex paper, all the way down to the mathematical nitty-gritty of how to handle a player who just found a magic sword that is actively trying to hijack their brain.
I think the best place to start is exactly where the book starts, which is the mindset of the referee.
Oh, absolutely.
Before you can even think about drawing a map or hiding a pile of copper pieces in a goblin cave, you have fundamentally understand your role at the table. And the text is incredibly explicit about this philosophy.
And what exactly is that philosophy? Because I know when I first started running games, I definitely had the wrong mindset.
A lot of people do. So the core philosophy is that The referee must operate as a neutral architect.
Neutral architect. Yeah.
Right. You are an impartial judge, you are the facilitator of the pacing and the fun, and you are the ultimate arbiter of how the rules interact with the fiction. But you are never, under any circumstances, an adversary.
Never an adversary.
Exactly. The game is explicitly, fundamentally, not a competition between the person running the game and the people playing it.
I have to push back on that a little bit because this is exactly where I used to get tripped up.
Go for it.
I mean, I'm the guy drawing the map. I'm the one deliberately placing a pit trap covered in poison spikes right in the middle of the hallway, and I'm the one putting a fire-breathing dragon in the treasure room. How on earth is that not adversarial? I am literally designing things meant to kill their characters.
It's a really vital distinction, though, between setting a dangerous stage and actively trying to murder the actors.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think of it this way. The danger is impartial. You place the pit trap because it logically makes sense that the ancient tomb builders would want to deter grave robbers, right?
Right.
But once the game starts, you aren't trying to trick the players into falling into it. If they say they are carefully tapping the four stones with a 10-foot pole, you don't arbitrarily move the trap down the hall to guarantee they fall in any way. You reward their caution.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I see. So I think of it like being the physics engine of a video game.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like you don't hold a grudge against the player. When a player in a video game jumps off a cliff, the physics engine doesn't laugh maliciously and say, I gotcha.
Right, it doesn't care.
The physics engine just impassionately calculates the distance of the fall, applies the rules of gravity, and determines the damage. You just make sure gravity works consistently every single time they jump.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Consistency is the bedrock of neutrality. If the referee becomes truly adversarial, the entire social contract of the game breaks down instantly.
Because it's an unwinnable arms race.
Exactly, because the referee is functionally omnipotent. If your goal was just to win and kill the players, you don't need a clever goblin ambush. You can just say, 1,000 ancient dragons suddenly materialize from the sky and incinerate you. Game over.
Right, and there's no game there.
None at all. The challenge and the actual fun for the referee comes from presenting a fair, logical world that reacts realistically to what the players choose to do. You prepare the scenarios, you establish the baseline dangers, but you have to remain completely flexible to the player's sheer unpredictability.
And part of managing that ecosystem is controlling how fast the world reacts and how quickly the characters grow.
Right, the pacing.
Yeah, the book provides some really granular guidance on the speed of leveling up, which I found totally fascinating. It doesn't just say level them up when it feels right. It gives the referee actual mechanical dials they can turn to control the pace of the campaign.
It absolutely does, and it acknowledges that every single group of players wants a different narrative experience. So it lays out 3 distinct paces.
Okay, there's them.
You have the standard pace, where you'd expect a character to hit their second level of experience after roughly 3 or 4 sessions of play. That's the baseline.
Makes sense.
If they aren't hitting that mark, the referee knows mathematically they need to start sprinkling in a bit more treasure into the environment. If they are leveling too fast, maybe the treasure needs to be dialed back, or the monsters guarding it need to be significantly more lethal.
But then there are the extremes, right? The fast progression dial and the slow progression dial. Walk me through how a referee actually implements those, because it seems like it would change the entire genre of the game.
It completely changes the genre. Let's say you have a group that wants a high-octane, fast advancement style of play. Maybe they want to get to the godlike powers quickly.
Sure, some groups love that.
The referee achieves this by placing massive, glittering treasure hoards early on. But, referring back to our neutral architect principle, the neutrality must remain intact.
So you can't just hand it to them.
Right. A massive, game-changing hoard cannot just be sitting unguarded in an empty wooden box. It must be protected by terrifying, highly lethal monsters or incredibly complex, deadly puzzles. You increase the reward, but you proportionally increase the risk.
Right, so they might level up twice as fast, but they're also twice as likely to have their characters permanently killed trying to get that gold.
Exactly. It's high stakes. Now, on the flip side, the slow progression dial caters to groups who want deep, meticulous character development. They want a gritty, low fantasy struggle.
Like surviving by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah, exactly. The referee achieves this by making treasure incredibly scarce. The risks are generally lower, the monsters might be less overwhelming, but the rewards are a slow, grueling drip.
Every single copper piece matters.
It does. It turns the game from a heroic fantasy into basically a survival horror resource management simulation.
Okay, here is where it gets really complicated, though. Managing the mechanics of leveling and treasure is one thing, but managing the psychology of the human being sitting at your table is another.
Oh boy, yes.
The book talks a lot about policing the meta-knowledge barrier. What is that, and why is it so critical to this specific style of play?
This is perhaps the most common stumbling block for new groups, and it requires constant vigilance from the referee. The meta-knowledge barrier is the hard, uncompromising line between what the player knows,
Meaning the actual human being.
right, the human sitting in a chair at the table eating snacks, who has read fantasy novels and played video games for years.
Yeah.
It's the line between what they know and what the character knows.
The actual 19-year-old fictional adventurer standing in a damp, dark dungeon.
Exactly.
Give me a concrete example of how this plays out at the table, because it sounds easy in theory, but I imagine it's super messy in practice.
It's incredibly messy. Let's say the party is exploring a swamp, and the referee describes a towering, gangly creature with rubbery green skin that regenerates its wounds right in front of their eyes.
A classic troll.
A classic troll. Now, a veteran player sitting at the table knows from reading bestiaries and playing other games for 20 years that you have to use fire or acid to stop a troll from regenerating. It's just pop culture osmosis at this point.
Right. The player is immediately going to yell, "Quick, someone throw a flask of oil and light a torch."
Exactly. But their character is a farmhand who just picked up a rusty sword a week ago and has never ventured more than 5 miles from their village. That character has absolutely no idea what a troll even is.
Let alone reading a magical encyclopedia detailing its specific biological vulnerabilities.
Right, so the referee has to police that boundary. When the player yells to use fire, the referee has to pause the game and gently ask, "Wait, how does your character know that?"
Oh, that's good. Just call them out gently.
Yeah, you have to remind them, your character has no idea what this towering beast is. You have to figure it out in the fiction of the world. You have to experiment or research it in a town library or hear a rumor from a local.
It forces the players to rely on the world rather than their out-of-game memory banks.
Exactly. It keeps them grounded in the fiction.
But let me ask you about the late game. Let's say a group has successfully navigated the meta-knowledge, they've survived the slow progression, and you've been running a campaign for 2 years. The players are now high level. They are absurdly wealthy, they have incredible magical items, and they can cast earth-shattering spells. Doesn't the entire physics engine just fundamentally break under the weight of their power?
It can, easily, if the referee isn't prepared. And this is where the text really shines. It provides very specific analytical solutions for maintaining a challenge in the late game.
Because their motivations have to change, right?
Exactly. When characters get powerful, their motivations shift. They stop just exploring dusty dungeons for scattered coins, and they start trying to actively alter the geopolitical landscape of the world.
Right.
Spellcasters, for instance, aren't satisfied with the spells in the book anymore. They will start trying to research brand new, custom spells, or forge their own permanent magic items.
Which sounds incredibly fun as a player, but as a referee, that sounds like an absolute nightmare to balance. How do you say yes to that without letting them invent a spell that just instantly kills the final boss?
It is a balancing nightmare, and the book warns the referee to be incredibly vigilant during this phase. If a wizard player wants to invent a spell that does a massive, unavoidable damage without allowing the enemy a chance to dodge or resist it.
Or a spell that has no resource cost and can be cast infinitely.
Exactly. The referee has to step in. The guidance suggests a probationary period. You allow the player to test the newly researched spell in the game for a few sessions, but with an explicit out-of-game agreement that the referee can alter it later.
So you can nerf its damage, change its casting time, or even introduce unforeseen, dangerous magical side effects if it turns out to be game-breaking.
Precisely. You have to maintain the integrity of the game.
I love that. You essentially become a magical patent office. You are approving prototypes, but you reserve the right to issue a massive product recall if the spell starts causing the fabric of reality to explode.
That's a great way to put it.
But what about the sheer amount of money they have? High-level adventurers in these games are basically walking venture capital firms. They have tens of thousands of gold pieces.
Yeah.
How do you challenge someone who can just buy an army?
That is where the concept of narrative taxes comes into play.
Narrative taxes.
Yes, but the execution is critical. It cannot feel like an arbitrary punishment from a spiteful god. You don't just say, a master thief breaks into your heavily guarded vault in the night and steals all 50,000 gold pieces. Too bad.
Right, because that completely violates the neutral architect philosophy we discussed earlier. It totally strips player agency.
Exactly.
So how do you drain the economy organically?
You present them with choices that drain their excess wealth through logical world building. If they are high level, they probably want to build a castle or a wizard's tower.
No, for sure. Every player wants a base.
Well, that costs a fortune in raw materials. And then you introduce the maintenance costs. They have to pay monthly salaries for their private armies, their cooks, their spies.
Bribes to local politicians.
Absolutely. They have to fund massive bribes to local politicians to keep their land rights. If a neighboring lord gets jealous of their new castle, they have to fund a war effort. You give them a reason to want to spend that gold to secure their legacy.
It transitions from The book has this one rule regarding the flow of information that I just absolutely adore. And it's presented with such emphasis. It is the rule on maintaining mystery.
The naming rule.
Yes. Never, ever refer to monsters or magic items by their official canonical names.
It is a deceptively simple rule, but implementing it completely changes the atmosphere, the tension, and the immersion at the table.
Let me give you my analogy for this because it's like a police sketch. Let's say the players open a door. You don't just look at them and say, okay, you walk into the room and you see a bugbear.
Right, because the moment you say the word bugbear, the veteran players instantly access their mental database.
They know its armor class, they know its hit dice, they know it has a stealth bonus. The mystery is instantly dead. It just becomes a math problem.
Exactly. You've triggered their meta-knowledge again.
Right. So instead, you have to describe the purely sensory experience of the moment. You tell them, a hulking, hairy brute with long, gangly arms and animalistic, glowing yellow eyes lunges from the shadows, swinging a crude, rusted morning star.
That's so much better.
Suddenly, they aren't fighting a stat block anymore. They are fighting a terrifying, unknown entity. They don't know if it's a demon, a mutant, or a completely new monster you invented.
And this philosophy applies universally, especially to surprise attacks or traps. If something attacks a character in the pitch black, you don't say, a giant centipede bites you.
Because the character can't see it.
Exactly. You say, something cold, segmented, and bristling with dozens of coarse hairs wraps tightly around your calf, and you feel a searing, venomous pinch.
Oof, that makes my skin crawl.
But it works. It forces the players to ask frantic questions, to experiment, to throw a torch on the ground, and to actually engage with the fictional reality rather than the underlying game mechanics.
And speaking of game mechanics, the book insists on keeping monster stats and, crucially, their hit points entirely hidden behind the referee's screen, right? Walk me through why that is so crucial, because modern games often use health bars or tokens to show exactly how injured an enemy is.
Let's look at the psychology of combat. If you tell a player that a monster has 20 hit points, and the player hits it with a sword for 8 damage, and you say, okay, it has 12 hit points left, you have completely removed them from the fantasy.
The visceral immersion just evaporates.
It is no longer a life or death struggle, it's a subtraction exercise. The book explicitly instructs the referee to translate those hidden mathematical numbers into narrative, physical reality.
So instead of saying, you did 8 damage, you describe the physical deterioration of the creature.
Precisely. If the monster is at full health and takes a tiny amount of damage, you say, your blade grazes its thick hide, barely leaving a scratch, and it laughs at you.
Which is terrifying.
Right. But if that 8 damage brings the monster down to its last few hit points...
You'd say something like, your blade bites incredibly deep into the creature's shoulder. Dark, thick blood sprays across the cobblestones, and you can see it physically staggering backwards. Its breathing is ragged, it's struggling to hold its weapon up, but a desperate, cornered fury lights up in its eyes.
That's it exactly. You are conveying the exact same mechanical information. You are communicating that the monster is near death and highly dangerous, but you are doing it in a way that creates a visceral, immersive tension.
Describing the messy, desperate, exhausting reality of a fantasy battle sustains the illusion. Reading numbers off a spreadsheet shatters it.
Absolutely.
So we are describing the monsters like police sketches. We are translating abstract hit points into blood, sweat, and exhaustion. But how do we handle the actual physical space? How do we map the world when they were crawling through these massive underground labyrinths?
The physical act of exploration is a massive foundational pillar of this playstyle. The traditional procedure outlined in the referee's tome relies heavily on delegating responsibility to the player.
To the players.
Yes. The referee describes the precise dimensions of the environment, saying, "You are in a damp stone corridor that stretches 30 feet north before branching sharply left and right," and the players physically draw their own maps on a piece of graph paper based entirely on that verbal description.
Wait, really? So I don't give them a map to look at. I describe it, and they have to draw it. Doesn't that introduce a massive amount of human error?
It introduces a monumental amount of human error, and that is precisely the point.
Wow.
Think about it. If they misinterpret your description, or if they forget to map a side corridor, or if they draw a room too small, their map becomes inaccurate.
And when they are fleeing from a horde of skeletons, completely out of healing potions, and their last torch is flickering out, that inaccurate map might lead them to a dead end instead of the exit.
Exactly. The map itself becomes a tool for survival.
That is terrifying and amazing. But how do you keep the descriptions from bogging down the game? I mean, saying it goes north 32 feet, then angles 45 degrees sounds exhausting after an hour.
To speed things up, the book suggests agreeing on a standard unit of measurement, usually expressing dimensions in squares of graph paper rather than exact footage.
Well, like a grid.
Right, usually 1 square equals 10 feet. So instead of a convoluted architectural description, you just say, the room is 4 squares wide and 6 squares long, with a door in the top right square. It streamlines the communication instantly without removing the player's responsibility of charting the unknown.
But what about those incredibly complex, chaotic, tactical moments? Let's say the players walk into a massive cavern. There are 15 goblins on ledges, a pit trap in the center, stalagmites blocking line of sight, and the wizard is trying to figure out if their fireball spell will hit the goblins without incinerating their friends. The theater of the mind and a rough sketch on graph paper can get really strained there. People start arguing about who is standing where.
It absolutely can break down in complex skirmishes, and the text accommodates that reality. It allows for the optional use of grid surfaces and miniatures for those specific, highly complex tactical moments.
Okay, so you can pull out the battle mat.
You can. You can use erasable mats where 1 inch equals 5 feet of game space and place tokens to represent everyone. It shifts the focus momentarily from pure imagination to concrete, tactical puzzle solving.
That makes sense for big fights.
But the mastery of the referee lies in knowing when to pull that tool out and when to put it away and rely on verbal description to maintain the dark, mysterious atmosphere. You don't need a grid for a conversation with a bartender or a quick skirmish with 2 giant rats.
Okay, so we've got the shadows described perfectly, we've got the maps drawn with human error, and we know how to handle the grids. Now we need to populate these spaces. We need to breathe life into the monsters and the scenarios. Because once you have described the shadowy corners of the world, you can't just fill them with static obstacles waiting to be bumped into.
Yeah.
A world of mannequins isn't scary.
This is where the referee's role as the physics engine intersects with being an advanced behavioral simulator.
Advanced behavioral simulator, I like that.
The book provides a masterful synthesis of how to approach monster intelligence and combat tactics. The baseline assumption, and this is critical, is that intelligent creatures are not just standing around in empty rooms, staring at the wall, waiting for adventurers to kick down the door and murder them.
Right. If I'm an evil sorcerer or a cunning goblin chieftain, I am going to prepare my house for intruders. I'm not going to leave my front door unlocked and my treasure in the hallway.
Exactly. Intelligent monsters use tactics that make logical survival sense. If a group of kobolds are cunning but physically weak, they won't charge into a chaotic melee sword fight with heavily armored knights. It's suicide.
They get crushed.
Instead, they will lay hidden traps, they will set up ambushes in dark choke points, they will shoot arrows from reinforced murder holes in the ceiling, and they will absolutely use expendable guard pets like trained wolves or giant centipedes to absorb the frontline damage while they attack from a distance.
And here's a detail from the text that I love, which I think catches a lot of modern players off guard. If there are magic items lying around their lair, the monsters will use them against the players.
Oh, absolutely.
It is so frustrating as a player to finally defeat a villain only to realize the wand of lightning bolts you just looted only has 1 charge left because the villain was shooting you with it for the last 10 minutes. But logically, it makes perfect sense. Why would a goblin chief leave a magic wand in a chest while his tribe is being slaughtered?
It reinforces the objective reality of the world. The items aren't player loot until the players earn them. They are tools of the world. Furthermore, the book points out that monsters learn.
They learn.
Yes. If the players encounter a group of intelligent enemies, engage in a bloody skirmish, and then the players decide to retreat to the surface to rest and heal for a day, those enemies aren't just going to hit a reset button and wait for them to come back.
They just respawn in their original position.
Yeah. No. They will adapt. They will reinforce the doors. They will set new traps. They might call for heavier reinforcements from deeper in the dungeon. Or, if they feel they are outmatched, they will completely relocate their treasure and abandon the lair entirely. The players will come back to an empty, heavily trapped cave.
But let me ask you the obvious question here. If the monsters are actively learning, adapting, using magic items, setting lethal traps, and fighting with perfect tactical coordination, won't they just wipe out the party every single time? Doesn't the game become impossibly lethal and frustrating?
This is where the mechanics of monster morale and motivation come into play, preventing the game from becoming a pure meat grinder. Monsters, exactly like players, have self-interest and a desire for self-preservation.
Okay.
The referee must constantly roleplay the monster's alignment, personality, and morale. A band of highway bandits doesn't inherently want to die for a cause. They just want your money. If they lose half their numbers in the first round of combat, the referee rolls a morale check.
And if they fail?
If they fail, they will break and flee into the woods.
They aren't mindless video game enemies programmed to fight to the death just to drain the player's resources.
Precisely. They hold grudges, they negotiate, they surrender, they beg for their lives. The referee has to constantly ask themselves, what does this specific creature want right now?
That adds so much depth.
It really does. They won't automatically bend to the player's will, and negotiations can go terribly wrong if the players are insulting, but they also won't just throw their lives away needlessly. This creates incredibly dynamic, fluid encounters where combat might organically turn into a tense hostage negotiation, or a frantic tactical retreat, or an uneasy temporary truce because a bigger monster just entered the room.
It turns combat from a static math equation into a chaotic diplomatic crisis. It's beautiful. Now, to get these players and monsters interacting in the first place, the book provides a robust, varied list of adventure hooks. These are the sparks that ignite the powder keg. Let's run through some of these because they perfectly illustrate the tone of this classic era.
They really showcase the breadth of narrative genres this game engine can handle. You have the classic foundational tropes like banishing a dormant evil that has just been awakened.
Oh, like perhaps accidentally unleashed by another group of foolish amateur adventurers.
Exactly.
The classic, we dug too deep, triggered a curse, and now there are shadows eating the townsfolk. Please go fix our mistake scenario.
Then you have scenarios rooted more in exploration, colonization, and expansion, like clearing out ruins. Imagine settlers want to move into an abandoned, overgrown stronghold to establish a new trade route, but the players have to go in first and clear out whatever monstrous squatters have moved in over the last century.
It's like extreme pest control.
It is. And the text notes this doesn't have to be out in the remote wilderness. These ruins could be ancient, forgotten catacombs sitting right underneath a major, bustling modern city.
I personally love the hook about making contact with degenerate lost civilization.
Oh, those are fun.
The idea that players might be exploring a deep cave system and stumble upon a fantastical, forgotten location where humanoids were trapped thousands of years ago. They have adapted to some bizarre subterranean life. Maybe they have translucent pale skin, they communicate through echolocation, and they've reverted to bestial, primitive behavior. It feels very pulp fantasy, very Edgar Rice Burroughs or H.P. Lovecraft.
It leans heavily into the weird fiction influences of the 1970s. It's not all just elves and goblins. And finally, you have high fantasy hooks involving bidirectional magical doorways. Portals, finding ancient glowing portals that transport the players instantly across the continent, or perhaps to entirely different planes of existence. The players might be hired by a wizard's guild to map a portal network, or they might have to figure out how to seal a malfunctioning gateway that is leaking horrific alien monsters into the local forest.
So we have the actors, the players, and the monsters, and we have the scripts, the adventure hooks. Now we need to build the actual stage. This is where the book gets incredibly practical. We are talking about architecting the Megadungeon, mapping the vast wilderness, and establishing the base town. This is the heavy lifting of world building.
And the book breaks this massive task down into a highly procedural, logical order. It prevents the referee from getting overwhelmed.
Which is so easy to do.
Very easy. Let's start with the dungeon itself, the core of the game. The book emphasizes massive variety in the setting. A dungeon shouldn't just be an endless series of uniform gray stone corridors. It could be an ancient, dusty family crypt, a twisting network of natural water-carved limestone caverns, a flooded, abandoned dwarven mine, or a ruined temple dedicated to a forgotten god. The aesthetic foundation changes everything about how the players interact with the space.
And the process of actually stocking the rooms, deciding what is behind every door, is fascinating. It's not just a random smattering of stuff you throw down. The referee is instructed to carefully balance 3 elements: empty rooms, monster layers, and special feature rooms.
And the empty rooms are key.
Let me tell you, when I first read this, I didn't understand why empty rooms were important, but they are absolutely crucial.
Why do you think that is? Let's look at the psychology of an empty room from a design perspective.
It's entirely about pacing and psychological tension. If every single room in a 60-room dungeon has a dragon or a puzzle or a lethal trap in it, the players get exhausted. The game becomes a monotonous slog of endless combat.
Yes, the fatigue sets in quickly.
Empty rooms build agonizing suspense. The players spend 10 minutes carefully picking the lock, they kick open the door, weapons drawn, shouting battle cries, and nothing, just dust, cobwebs, and echoes.
And then what do?
They spend the next 20 minutes paranoid, tapping every floorboard, searching for secret doors that aren't there, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The emptiness of the space makes the actual monster encounter in the next room so much more terrifying.
That is a brilliant observation. The negative space in a dungeon map is just as important as the occupied space. It allows the game to breathe, and it allows the player's own paranoia to do the heavy lifting for you.
Exactly.
Now, once they survive the dungeon and step out into the sunlight, you have to map the macro-level world, the wilderness. The text advises starting very large and zooming in.
Right, you start with these massive regional hex maps, where one hexagonal space equals maybe 24 miles of terrain. It's the satellite view of the continent.
You don't start by placing towns. You map the natural geography first. Where are the massive, impassable mountain ranges? Where do the major rivers flow from those mountains to the sea? Where do the dense, dark forests sit?
Establish the terrain first.
Exactly. Once the raw physical geography is set, you carve out territories based on historical logic. Human realms will naturally cluster around rivers and arable farmland because they need water and food to sustain cities.
Nomadic tribes might roam the arid plains.
Right. Monstrous domains, like a troll kingdom, will be hidden deep in the inaccessible swamps or the high mountain peaks. The world has to make geographic, economic, and political sense before the players ever set foot in it.
And right in the middle of all of this, usually situated near a major river or a heavily trafficked trade road, you place the beating heart of the campaign, the base town.
The anchor of the entire experience.
Exactly. To use another video game analogy, the base town is the hub world. It is the designated safe zone. It is where you drag your bleeding characters to heal their wounds, where you spend your hard-earned gold to buy more arrows and torches, where you try to quietly fence your stolen goblin silverware, and where you pick up the next rumor that leads to the next quest.
It provides a stark contrast to the relentless danger of the dungeon.
But building a functional, believable town requires its own set of mechanics.
The book provides detailed demographics to help the referee logically scale the settlement. You could start the campaign in a tiny, isolated hamlet of 50 people, where everyone knows everyone and resources are incredibly scarce.
That changes the vibe entirely.
It does. Or you could base them in a bustling large town of a few thousand, or a massive, sprawling metropolis of over 15,000 citizens. And depending on the size of that population, the referee has to meticulously place essential services.
Let's dive deep into those services, because this is where the absolute best roleplay gold is hidden. First off, and arguably most importantly for a group of adventurers, the black market.
Essential for any adventuring party. Think about it realistically. Adventurers inevitably acquire loot that is, well, difficult to explain to the local authorities.
Ancient magical artifacts, strange glowing gems, perhaps jeweled crowns that clearly belonged to local nobility but were found in a troll's stomach.
They can't just walk into a bakery and pay for bread with a cursed emerald. They need a place to fence these goods, which means interacting with smugglers, fences, and local thieves' guilds.
Which introduces an incredible element of risk in the safe zone. Are they getting ripped off? Is the fence going to rat them out to the guards?
Speaking of the guards, the book specifically prompts the referee to make a vital decision about the town watch. Are these guards honest, upstanding protectors of the peace, or do they take bribes?
That one single detail completely changes the texture of the town and how the players interact with the law.
It establishes the moral and political tone of the entire base town. If the players get caught causing a massive tavern brawl and setting the bar on fire, do they go to a high-security prison? Or do they just slide 50 gold pieces to the watch captain in a dark alley and walk away scot-free?
You also have to place magical healing services, usually in the form of local temples, churches, or shrines. But here is the kicker. Healing isn't free.
No, it's not.
The clerics don't just wave their hands at the goodness of their hearts. This creates a powerful economic drain on the players' resources. They risk their lives in the muck to find gold, only to return to town and pay that exact gold to the local high priest to cure the horrifying magical diseases they caught in the swamp.
It creates a closed-loop economy. And finally, you have the social hubs, the taverns, the inns, and the marketplaces. This is where the referee operates the rumor mill.
Ah, yes, the rumor mill.
You seed these locations with gossip, some of it completely true, some of it wildly exaggerated, and some of it dangerously false, to naturally guide the players toward the dungeons you placed on the regional map. It is organic, diegetic quest delivery. You don't give them a quest board, you let them eavesdrop on drunken mercenaries.
Which perfectly transitions us into the final and perhaps most vital aspect of the referee's toolkit. We have built a geography of the world, we have populated it with intelligent monsters and corrupt guards, and we've built a functioning economy. But what actually drives the human players to make their characters leave the safety of the tavern, walk into the dark woods, and brave the horrors of the wilderness?
It is the ultimate behavioral reward loop. It's the holy trinity of classic gaming: treasure, magic, and experience points.
The engine of character progression. But wait, explain this progression loop to me in detail, because it sounds like hitting things with the sword isn't actually the point of the game at all.
It's really not.
In most modern RPGs, you kill a goblin, you get XP. You kill a dragon, you get a lot of XP. But this system is fundamentally mathematically different.
It is a massive paradigm shift. In this classic system, characters certainly earn a small amount of experience points for defeating monsters. If you slay a manticore in a brutal fight, you get a minor reward for the combat.
Okay, a minor reward.
But the primary mathematical engine of character growth, the thing that actually causes them to level up, is the recovery of treasure. Specifically, every single gold piece hauled out of the dangerous dungeon and brought back to the safe haven equals exactly 1 experience point.
Which completely shifts the incentives of the players. If I know that gold equals XP and fighting monsters is highly lethal and gives very little XP, then combat is actually a fail-state.
Exactly.
If my party can sneak past a sleeping dragon, quietly pick the lock on its chest, steal 10,000 gold pieces and sneak out without ever drawing our swords, we get massive XP. We level up for being clever.
It encourages players to view the dungeon not as a combat arena, but as a heist. It rewards stealth, negotiation, trickery, and lateral thinking. It makes violence a high-risk, desperate tool of last resort, rather than the default solution to every problem.
That is such a cool way to look at it.
Now, the referee has 2 distinct methods for placing this vital, game-changing loot into the world. The first is random generation. The book has extensive, highly complex mathematical tables called treasure types. Every monster in the book is assigned a letter, and that letter dictates the statistical probability of finding certain coins, gems, or magic items in their lair. You roll the dice, and the dice dictate the economy.
That sounds chaotic. What if you roll terribly and a dragon has nothing, or you roll perfectly and a goblin has a legendary sword?
That's the chaotic charm of the random method. But the second method is the artisan approach, or the referee choice method. This is where the referee mathematically plots out the campaign. You calculate the exact amount of XP the players need to hit their next level, you design a specific, custom-tailored treasure hoard that equals that exact amount, and then you purposefully place it deep in the dungeon.
But the golden rule of the artisan approach, as you mentioned earlier, is maintaining the balance of risk and reward. If I place a hoard worth 10,000 experience points, I cannot just leave it in an unlocked room. I have to ensure it is protected by appropriately deadly foes, complex mechanical traps, or environmental hazards like a river of magma. The adventurers must bleed or use incredible ingenuity to earn that growth.
And what are they bleeding for? Aside from the raw gold pieces to level up, they are searching for wondrous magic items. This is where the late 70s advanced fantasy flavor really truly shines through. The rulebook contains hundreds of items, but they are rarely just a sword that does +1 damage. They are bizarre, reality-bending artifacts.
Let's do a deep dive into some specific items because they perfectly illustrate how wild this game can get. Let's start with the Well of Many World. I love this thing.
Oh, a classic.
To the naked eye, it just looks like a simple, completely unassuming black piece of cloth, folded up like a gentleman's handkerchief. But when a player unfolds it and places it on a solid surface, it doesn't just sit there. It immediately opens a 6-foot diameter dimensional hole that drops directly into an entirely different reality, plane of existence, or world.
And the terror of it is that the referee gets to decide in that exact moment where it goes. It could drop them into the burning elemental plane of fire, or into the middle of a bustling, hyper-advanced alien city, or a prehistoric jungle filled with dinosaurs.
Anything placed into the hole is transported instantly.
Yes, and while a corresponding hole opens on the other side, allowing travel back, it is incredibly dangerous. It is a portable doorway to infinite unknown variables. What if you place it down and a horde of demons immediately climbs out of it into your bedroom?
It's the ultimate Pandora's box.
Yeah.
But if we are talking about risk and reward, there's one item that stands above all others as the absolute pinnacle of gambling: the Book of Infinite Spells.
Oh, this item is a brilliant psychological torture device for players.
It really is.
Yeah.
So let's break this down. It is this massive, ancient tome of incomprehensible magical power. But right out of the gate, it is incredibly hostile. If a non-magic user, like a fighter or a thief, tries to read it, just opens the front cover, the book unleashes a massive shock of magical energy. It severely damages them, burns their hands, and paralyzes them for hours. It aggressively rejects the uninitiated.
But for the magic user, the wizard of the party, it grants access to godlike power. The book has a seemingly endless number of pages. Each page contains a single, incredibly potent spell, and reading that page grants the owner the ability to cast that spell potentially up to 4 times a day without having to memorize it. It is an immense, game-breaking power spike for a spellcaster.
But here's the terrifying catch. Here's the mechanic that makes it brilliant. Every single time the player uses a spell from that book, the referee secretly rolls a die. There's a slim chance, exactly 1 in 6, that the spell simply vanishes from the page forever. The magical text fades away, the ability to cast it is gone, and the player is forced to turn to the next page, which contains a completely random, unknown spell. It could be a spell that stops time, or it could be a spell that just creates a puddle of water.
It creates a beautiful, agonizing tension at the table. Imagine a scenario. The wizard has the book turned to a page that casts a massive healing spell. The party's fighter is bleeding out on the floor about to die. The wizard can save them. But if they cast it, there is a 1 in 6 chance they lose that healing spell forever.
Wow.
Do they risk losing their most powerful tool to save their friend now, knowing they might need it for the final boss tomorrow? It forces the player into a constant state of resource management and gambler's anxiety. It is brilliant, stressful game design.
And it's important to note that not all magic items are beneficial, even with a catch. Let's talk about cursed scrolls. Because when modern players hear trap or curse, they usually just think of an explosion that does 20 damage. But explain to me how these specific curses work, because they don't just kill you, they fundamentally alter the game state and your character's life.
That is what makes them so insidious and terrifying. A trap that does damage is a temporary mathematical setback. You drink a healing potion, you sleep for 8 hours, and you move on.
Right.
A cursed scroll is different. It triggers the moment a player unrolls the parchment and looks at the baneful script. It doesn't explode. It infects them. It inflicts a lingering, permanent condition that changes how the player has to interact with the world going forward.
Give me some concrete examples of what these curses actually do mechanically. How bad can it get?
One of the most devastating curses severely nerfs a character's ability to heal. It fundamentally breaks their recovery mechanics. Imagine a warrior whose natural healing suddenly takes days instead of hours, and any magical healing spells cast upon them only restore half their normal amount.
Oh, that's rough.
Suddenly, that character becomes incredibly, terrifyingly fragile. Every single point of damage they take from a goblin's arrow is a monumental crisis, because getting that health back is going to be an agonizingly slow, expensive process. It changes their entire playstyle from aggressive to hyper-cautious.
There is also a curse that I read that forces the player to permanently re-roll their prime requisite stat. Think about how devastating that is.
Hmm.
Imagine you're playing a brilliant, aristocratic wizard with a genius-level intellect of 18. You've played them for months. You read a bad piece of parchment, the curse triggers, and suddenly the referee forces you to pick up the dice and re-roll your intelligence.
Yeah.
You could roll a 7. You drop down to below average intelligence. It changes the entire identity and capability of the character in a single moment.
And crucially, these curses usually cannot be fixed by just sleeping it off at the inn. They require high-level, incredibly expensive magic from a major temple to remove. Or, as the book suggests for a more narrative approach, the referee can demand an epic quest of atonement to lift the curse.
That's a great plot hook.
The curse literally becomes the new narrative driver. The entire party has to put their plans for the dungeon on hold to travel across the treacherous continent to find the one holy spring that can wash away the baneful script. The punishment generates entirely new, unexpected gameplay.
Okay, we have saved the absolute best for last. The ultimate wild card in the referee's arsenal. We need to talk about sentient swords. Wait, let me make sure I understand this correctly. Are you telling me that a piece of loot, a weapon you find at the bottom of a dusty dungeon chest, can literally develop an ego and actively try to hijack your character's brain?
I am.
How on earth does a referee run that fairly without the player just quitting the game?
It sounds absurd, and it sounds like a violation of player agency, but it is handled with incredibly elegant, dramatic mechanics. Sentient swords are not just inanimate objects, they are fully realized non-player characters with their own agendas, personalities, and goals. They have a randomly generated intelligence score, they have a distinct moral alignment, and most importantly, they have a specific, singular purpose.
So, for example, a sword might be lawful good, but its specific driving obsession is to eradicate all chaotic dragons.
Exactly, and the dramatic tension arises because the sword has psychological triggers. It doesn't just passively accept being swung around by whoever picks it up, it has pride. If the player character drops below half their maximum health in a fight, the sword might panic, believing its wielder is too weak to protect it.
Okay, that makes sense.
If the player finds another magical weapon and puts the sentient sword in its scabbard to try out the new axe, the sentient sword might get intensely jealous and start vibrating angrily. Or, most dangerously, if the player attempts to perform an action that violates the sword's moral alignment, like a lawful sword's wielder trying to attack an innocent person.
What happens in that moment? Do they just argue telepathically in the player's head?
They do far more than argue. If the sword's triggers are pushed too far, they engage in a control check. This is an abstract, mechanical clash of sheer willpower. The referee first calculates the sword's will score. This is a combination of its base intellect, its generated ego score, and mechanical bonuses for any extraordinary magical powers it possesses.
Okay, so it gets a strong baseline.
Furthermore, if the sword and the wielder are of different moral alignments, the sword gets a massive boost to its will because it is naturally rebellious.
So the sword is actively mechanically resisting its wielder.
Then, the referee calculates the wielder's will score, combining their physical strength stat and their mental wisdom stat. But here is the brilliant mechanical twist. If the character is currently wounded, their will score is temporarily reduced. They are physically bleeding and mentally exhausted.
Oh, that is brutal. So let's picture this. You are bleeding out, you are exhausted from fighting a dragon, and the glowing magical metal stick in your hand decides that now is the perfect time to assert dominance over your mind.
Exactly. You compare the two final scores. If the sword's will is higher than the player's will, the sword literally takes physical control of the character's motor functions. The referee, temporarily, gets to dictate what the player does. The sword might force the player to immediately drop their other weapons and shields to prove their devotion to the sword.
That's wild.
It might force them to charge headlong into a suicidal battle they were trying to run away from because the sword's purpose demands it. Or it might force them to march into town and donate all their gold to a temple aligned with the sword's beliefs.
It creates brilliant, entirely organic role-play drama out of a standard piece of equipment. The player is no longer just fighting monsters in a dungeon. They are fighting a psychic internal battle of wills against their own primary weapon. It's like having a toxic, hyper-controlling roommate living inside your sword.
And that single mechanic perfectly encapsulates the philosophy of the entire referee's tome. The rules, the math, the charts, they exist not to constrain the players or force them down a linear path, but to generate unpredictable, highly memorable drama that neither the players nor the referee could have anticipated.
Which brings us nicely to the summary of this incredibly dense, fascinating toolkit. The referee's tome doesn't just give you a list of rules and numbers to memorize for combat. It gives you the psychological blueprints to manage a table full of unpredictable humans, and the architectural blueprints to build a living, breathing, internally consistent fantasy world that reacts dynamically to their presence. It is a masterclass in neutral world design.
It gives you the mechanical dials to control the pacing of the campaign, the exact procedures to map the terrifying unknown, and the economic structure to drive player motivation away from mindless violence and toward clever problem solving. It is a complete standalone engine for imagination.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into the Megadungeon, I think you have a final thought to leave the listener with, something a bit philosophical to mull over before they gather their friends for their next session.
I do. When we talk about running a role-playing game in the modern era, we almost exclusively use the word storyteller. We say the referee is there to tell a story.
Right, that's the common phrasing.
But consider this, based on everything we've read in this classic tome, a truly great referee operating in this specific style of play isn't a storyteller at all. They are an architect of a neutral sandbox. You build the physics, you place the traps, you establish the economics, and you motivate the monsters. The story is simply the messy, unpredictable, blood-stained footprint left behind by the players trying desperately to survive the world you've built. You don't write the plot, you just build the chessboard and watch it catch fire.
I absolutely love that. A neutral architect of chaos. If you are preparing to run a game, embrace the fire. Keep exploring the unknown, keep questioning the mechanics behind the curtain, and as always, keep rolling the dice.